this meeting to order. Welcome to this October 3rd meeting of the Somerville School Committee. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2024, this meeting of the School Committee will be conducted via hybrid participation. We will post an audio recording, audio-video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive records of these proceedings as
Recording
soon as
in
possible
progress.
after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local cable access government channels. With that, Superintendent, will you call the roll?
Through the chair, Ms. Barish,
Here.
Mayor Ballantyne, President Owen Campen, Andrew Green,
Here.
Mr. Bitton,
Here.
Mrs. Bitton, Dr. Ackman,
Here.
Dr. Phillips,
Here.
Chair Kripchen.
Here.
We have quorum.
We will start with a moment of silence and salute to the flag. We're going to dedicate this meeting to a member of our community who passed away. Dr. Phillips is just going to read quickly about her before we have our moment of silence.
Known by many at the SPS Enrollment Office, formerly the Parent Information Center, as Mama Ada, Ada Corredor dedicated 20 years of service to the Somerville Public Schools as the first PIC Spanish liaison from 1995 to 2015. She touched many staff, parents, students, and all that crossed her path with kindness and love.
So we'll have a moment of silence in her honor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will now introduce our interpreters. Spanish, if you could unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michaela Yang, and I will be interpreting for Spanish tonight. Buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Michaela Yang y voy a estar haciendo la traducción al español. Si necesitan escuchar el audio en español, en un momento va a aparecer el símbolo de un globo. Pueden apretar ese botón y hacer la selección de idioma. Muchas gracias.
And Portuguese, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, my name is Thelma Leitão. I will be your Portuguese interpreter for tonight. To listen to this meeting, click to the globe on the bottom on your screen and select the Portuguese language. Boa noite, meu nome é Thelma Leitão e serei sua intérprete de português essa noite. Para ouvir essa reunião, clique no globo na parte inferior da sua tela e selecione o idioma português.
And Haitian Creole.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Angie Supri. I'll be your Haitian Creole interpreter for tonight. Bonsoir tout nou, non c'est Angie Supri. Je vais interpréter pour nous à soir. Si nous besoin créole haïtien, tant pis garder en bas écran au moment n'a pas un globe. Cliquez sur lui, choisissez français pour créole haïtien. Merci.
Great, thank you. We will start with a report of our student rep who is here with us in person this evening, and then we will take things out of order and take up our resolution for the Winter Hill students who are here with us this evening. So first, Ana Sofia. Oh.
This month is Hispanic Heritage Month, which we've had like various events at our school for that. I think there was a movie night at the library. The movie night at the library the other day, and I think there's going to be a salsa class at some point, which is really cool. Our student school committee reps have meetings every X block, which is our last hour on Wednesdays, and in the following weeks we're going to have student focus groups where we're going to have like direct student input with meetings. We're going to go out in pairs and just ask some questions, what people like about SHS, what could use improvement. And in my side of things, seniors are just kind of focused in on their college applications, and yeah.
Great. Are there questions or comments for our student rep? Mr. Green?
First of all, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I have been doing over the summer and into the fall, talking to other seasoned towns about ways in which to make the student representative's experience more useful for the student rep and for the committee. I've heard ideas, and I'd love to, I'm just going to throw some ideas I've heard out, and I'd love to talk with the student rep about her interests. I've heard things like having them on subcommittees, making sure that they're fully aware of their ability to put things on the agenda. Basically, they should have all the rights and privileges of a school committee member, short of the vote. And so thinking about what would make this role useful for you and for your students is something I think we should make a priority this year.
Agreed. Are there any other, yes, Ms. Parrish?
Through you to Ana Sofia, thanks for being here. I missed if you said specifically what you were asking for student feedback on. I may just not have heard it, or maybe you didn't say specifically.
Just a general consensus on what SHS needs to improve it. I think for like underclassmen, we're going to ask what structure of middle school that they enjoyed that they would like to see in the high school, what traditions, events that they'd want to see throughout their high school career, and then I guess geared more towards seniors, what senior events we'd like just to make the most of our year.
Thanks.
Sounds exciting. All right. With that, we are going to take things out of order and take up our resolution in support of Winter Hill students. Mr. Green, would you like to make a motion and or read the actual resolution?
I would love to do that. Say it's put, and I'll read it.
All right.
So in the meantime, if you want to sit and praise or whatever, do what I pull it up, that'd be great. I have 2 minutes.
All right. Would anyone like to make any comments? Actually, we can, well, I'll let you read it before we move to pass the resolution. I also just first want to thank all the students for being here with us this evening. We're excited to have you. And Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you, Chair, to the students. I don't know how much you guys have heard, but there is a committee that's being put together by the mayor to advise on the structure, whether or not it'll be 1 school, 2 separate schools, whatever the decision is, or make a recommendation on that. And I just wanted to let you know that there are several members of this committee that really advocated strongly to make sure that committee was starting with the work that you guys have already done. So I just wanted to make sure you had heard that. So thank you.
Can I do it?
I'll have Andre read the resolution and then you can.
Whereas the 2023-2024 Winter Hill 8th grade, as representative of the student body, did awe-inspiring work collecting meaningful data from both the Brown and Winter Hill communities regarding their hopes and concerns of the future of their buildings, and whereas they voiced important requests regarding their involvement in key decision-making processes and future developments of their school, and whereas fostering a collaborative environment between the school building committee and the Wildcats is essential for ensuring that the voices of current and future students are heard, and whereas continuing to engage each year's Winter Hill 8th graders in meaningful dialogue about upcoming decisions will empower them to gather input from your younger students, enhancing their sense of ownership in their school community, as well as giving decision makers much needed community feedback. And whereas the demolition of 115 Sycamore Street presents a unique opportunity for catharsis and closure for the Wildcats, allowing them to participate in a symbolic act of moving forward. And whereas ensuring that younger and future Wildcats have access to adequate research activities and play materials is critical for their development and overall school experiences. Therefore, be it resolved, the Somerville School Committee thanks the 23-24 Winter Hill 8th grade for their hard work, resilience, and leadership, and be it further resolved that the Somerville School Committee supports our requests to 1, involve the Wildcats in major decision moments of the school building committee, ensuring that their insights and opinions are valued and considered. 2, establish regular communication with next year and future years 8th graders regarding upcoming decisions, facilitating opportunities for them to survey younger grades. 3, invite current Wildcats as well as WHCIS alums to participate in the demolition of 115 Sycamore Street, fostering a sense of closure and connection to their school history. 4, prioritize the acquisition of research activities and play materials for younger and future Wildcats, ensuring they enjoy a fulfilling school experience. 5, involve past, present, and future Wildcats in the groundbreaking and ribbon-cutting ceremonies in the new Winter Hill, celebrating their contributions and making a significant moment in their educational journey. Resolved, a copy of the resolution be shared with each of the 2023-2024 eighth graders, and a framed copy be shared with the Winter Hill community. And resolved, copies of this resolution and the 2023-2024 eighth grade report be shared with the mayor, the school building committee, and the mayor's community advisory group.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Green. Is there a second? I had a second by Ms. Patone. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries resoundingly. Before we recess for cake, Dr. Carmona would like to say a few words.
Yes, so I am thrilled to have Jade, Astrid, Havila, Sky, Sebastian, Aiden, Angel, Wesley, Ethan, Gustavo, Nia, Angela, Cole, Astrid, MJ, Sal, and Ellie. All of you, I know that once a wildcat, always a wildcat. I know many of you already are at the high school and probably in other places, but congratulations to all of you. I think I speak for everyone here that for us, anytime we celebrate a student's engagement, especially a civic project like this, a student learning in a way that is valuable and is effective, is really the pride of all of us. So thank you, Ms. Brady, for also making this moment happen. Thank you to the administration as well as everyone who is here. And parents who are at home, you should be very proud of your children. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And one last thing, I know there's among one of you who is the City Construction Advisory Group member. Is there one who was selected already or not? I was under the impression that someone was already joining as okay, so if not, I think we want to make sure that we engage one of you to join the City Construction Advisory Group. I thought there was one already named, but if not, let's make sure that we get that in the book. So thank you, everyone, and congratulations, and there's cake here for you.
Yeah, so we will take a brief recess to have cake. Oh, yeah, please.
I want to talk to the kids, sorry. Hi, everyone. I love you all individually and collectively very deeply. I'm so very proud of you and the work that you did last year and the work that you were doing this year. As a reminder, please never forget who you are and what you can do. You have the power to change the world. You have already done it. I'm very proud of you.
The only thing I want to publicly acknowledge in 360 degrees is when I think back to February, when you started the most epic project I think I'll ever do in my career. Can y'all picture the chalkboard on that side of the classroom? And on that chalkboard, we wrote all of the leaders involved in school decision-making. We had like the mayor, the school committee, the city council, executive department directors, the PTA, educators, and we made sure over the course of our project to engage every single one of those groups. And then at the end, it was you all who became the leaders that those adults had been waiting for. So congratulations, you deserve this moment so much, and I couldn't be prouder.
All right, now with that, we will take a few moments of recess and have cake. Wilkins for joining us.
Hi, Wildcats.
And we will now call us
It was my
back
honor.
to session.
I never thought I was going to get the chance. I say thank you to myself. Thank you.
All right, we are now back in session, and we will continue with our agenda. There's no public comment this evening, so we now have a few minutes to approve. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes from September 9th and September 23rd.
I have a motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Dr. Ackman. Seeing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the report of the superintendent.
Thank you, through the chair. And so as you have noticed that in most of our reports we try to coalesce around a specific theme. The theme for tonight is around wraparound supports for students. And as we have described many times, for many students, our schools provide many critical services outside of academics. Our schools are places where they have access to trusted adults, receive free nutritious meals, have multiple opportunities to participate in out-of-school time opportunities and athletics. And in the classroom, they learn not only about core subjects like math and ELA, but also have a robust social-emotional curriculum and access to social workers and mental health, behavioral health services. I am endlessly proud of the Somerville Public Schools and what we provide for our community. Do we still have a lot of work to do? Absolutely, yes we do. But with the right mix of academic and wraparound supports, our students have a fantastic starting point. So I just wanted to frame that because most of the things that we will be discussing today are around that, about wraparound supports. I'm going to start because I'm going to switch a little bit of the order of my presentation because there are some of the educators here and building leaders have some prior commitments. So at this time, I would like to invite the Student Services Director, Liz Doncaster, joined by Somerville High School Principal Alicia Kirsten and Next Wave Full Circle Principal Margaret Green to share information and updates on programs and supports we have in place for student safety and well-being. Take it away.
Hi, thank you, Superintendent Carmona, through you, Chair. I'm Liz Doncaster. I'm the Director of Student Services. I'm with Principal Green and Principal Kirsten. I wanted to just chat a little bit from the district point of view of our commitment to the safety and well-being of our students. It is our #1 priority. It starts with the policies and the district-wide policies and the school-level policies that we have, our programming and our resources for students, our partnerships with community members, resources and professional development for staff, communication and enforcement of the policies. But at the core really is the SEL development of students. The commitment to our students starts in the classroom with our vigorous and a rigorous curriculum, but also with the support of every student's social, emotional, and developmental skills through SEL curriculum and practices, helping all young adults, students and adults acquire and apply knowledge, skills, attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, and establish and maintain supportive relationships and make responsible and caring decisions. If all of these are successful, then a student can feel like they are part of a community, they belong, they are seen, they are heard, they feel safe and supported at school. We also offer some proactive and preparation skills through our safety measures. You can go 2 slides in, Erica, if you want. Every teacher and every student is very familiar with the bullying and the harassment and the retaliation policies and procedures. We have student support teams and community meetings in each school that help us identify students that are in need of either in our tiered system of interventions. We have, and I've presented here, our district-wide social and emotional development plan, which has our 2nd-step curriculum rollout, restorative justice, responsive classroom. We have a district-wide mediation team. We have those school-based social workers that Dr. Carmona talked about. We have our new social, emotional, and behavior response team in place and is already working at one of our schools. So those are all the things that sort of wrap around students to help them feel, to help create a positive environment for them and to help them get along with their peers. And then we also want to prepare them for any sort of safety measures that they might need. So when we think about safety measures, so that's all their social, emotional, and behavioral skills that we're teaching. And then we have to worry about the physical safety of our students. So that's where our safety drills come in. We have 4 mandated fire drills every year. We have the lockdown and safety and secure and hold drills that we do, 1 live one and 1 read-through every year. And so all of these things together help us and help students feel secure and safe at school and create a positive culture and a positive atmosphere where they can make friends, they can come in, they can access the curriculum, and they can feel as though this is a safe environment for them to thrive. I'm going to now bring up, there you go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Margaret DePasquale Green. I'm the principal of Next Wave in Full Circle. And like Liz just went through, like all the district protocols and procedures, we too are following the, the district-led fire drills, the lockdown procedures. We update our emergency response plan every year. But I would say one of the biggest components at Next Wave Full Circle is our teacher-counselor model, and that is what we really work to strive to strengthen with our students to really make them feel safe, seen, and heard at our school. So for those of you who are new to school committee or maybe don't know the structures of Next Wave Full Circle, Next Wave is the middle school. Students have a teacher counselor with them until they complete 8th grade. And then if those students stay with us for Full Circle, they get a new teacher counselor, and that person stays with them till 9th grade. And it's more than just knowing their name and what grade they're in and what credits they have. It's really knowing their family, it's knowing their story, it's knowing why they're at Next Wave Full Circle and what their needs are. This morning, a student was sitting in the Commons doing her work, and I'm in my office, but I heard her say to another person, this place feels like home, doesn't it? And she's like, I'm just so comfortable here. And this is one of our seniors who came to us from Somerville High a year and a half ago. And that, I just sat there and I was like, yes, that's the moment. Like, that's why I do this work. That's why I want our students to feel. I want them to feel comfortable in the day-to-day comings and goings of our school. The other thing we work really hard on is our daily schedule. We ensure that in our daily schedule, every day there is a clinical therapeutic block that our students are either meeting with their teacher counselor or they're meeting with some outside therapeutic supports that we're bringing in. We also have a weekly student government block where we're listening to student voice, and I have a committee where students come to me and voice their concerns or work on different things throughout the school. And then we also make sure we have our academic support blocks, and then we have electives at the end of the day where our students have a little bit more choice in what they do, and it's a little bit more fun way to end the school day. We also have a robust staff. All of my staff are special education teachers. I have a strong clinical team. I have 4 counselors on our team, in addition to a dean of students and a community engagement specialist. And so really the focus is supporting our students wherever they are, making sure they're able to access the curriculum and providing them the supports that they need. We are following the restorative practices that include, as Liz said, the second step curriculum, but also working on community meetings, doing our therapeutic check-ins with students. We do access the mediation department at Somerville High School, but we'll also do some mediation in-house. And we also do a lot of parent meetings, and we do a lot of behavior contracts and incentive building with our students. And then with security, I believe our building is secure. We have exterior doors that are locked throughout the school day, and our doors that go into Somerville High School, you can go into Somerville High, but Somerville High can't come into us, so they have to use passes and badges to get in through the doors. So I do believe we have a really good security system. I have access to walkie-talkies where I'm able to communicate with Somerville High School and know what's going on there. They're able to know what's going on at Next Wave Full Circle. So I will turn it over to Alicia Kirsten.
I think I was here last February presenting to you all, and I don't think anything I'm presenting tonight is anything terribly different, and not terribly different from what Liz and Margaret have already laid out. I started that presentation in February talking about how the key to safety is actually relationships, 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 and that is our emphasis, as you've heard from the previous two presenters as well. So we have our district protocols and procedures, but really what we try to do, and it's a little harder with 1,400 students and 160 staff members, but we really try to make sure that every student has some strong relationships with at least one adult and multiple students in the building. We are implementing a lot of restorative justice principles. Right now we're training all the teachers in some Tier 1 circles. Students are experiencing those weekly in their class 2. The idea being if you can build that foundation when more serious things happen, students are trained in how to communicate that way, and everybody has a voice and a sense of belonging. We are doing check-ins in our X-Block. There's a check-in protocol, so their X-Block teacher is checking in with students one-on-one. We're really trying to, I think we've actually come along, I'm going to jinx it now. Ask me at the end of the year with our data, but we're really trying to shift the culture. And you do the culture through the building through the relationships, but we really are trying to build more leadership opportunities and mentorship opportunities for students, with the older students mentoring the younger ones, because we can put all these relationships and all these wraparound supports in place, and they're important, but we're really going to get the most, I think the most shift in our cultures from the students themselves, and that will take care of some of our safety concerns. Anyway, just again, that relationships. In addition, we have, even though we're big, we have our communities where there's anywhere from 250 to 400 students in the community. Each student has a dean, an assistant principal, a counselor, and honestly, the person they probably know the best is the community secretaries in those spaces. They have a good relationship there. And we have a ton of supports, additional supports for students, adjustment counselors, social workers. For students who are struggling or there might be some safety concerns, we have different support plans for them, connect them with counselors. Our mediation plan program set records for how many cases they mediated last year. We are proud that over a third of those were initiated by students themselves, so they were looking for help solving conflicts on their own. And then on the bottom there, you can see we have a lot of more traditional security features in place as well.
All right, so we're now opening up to questions. Thank you for that presentation. Yeah, Mr. Bichon?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, thank you for this very helpful presentation. The safety of our students is sort of the bottom of that pyramid that we all are familiar with, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So this is a strong foundation. Just glancing at the slide that we're on right now, I know that there was some rollout at some point of the shot detection system, and was it on, was it off? Is it fully implemented now? And
as far as I know, and the reason I know it is working, in my first year on this job, so 2 years ago now, we had a track meet. And they just fired the starter pistol in the building. So luckily, Sibby was there and sort of got the, he got the text, and he was able to meet the police officers as they came in. So it triggered it. So I don't know if it gets tested. We can ask Liz that, but we don't use starter pistols anymore. And we had to also go through and make sure it wasn't going to pick up some of the noises from our CTE programming. So as far as I know, I don't know if we test it regularly, but it is installed and working.
Mr. Green?
Just a reminder for everyone that some of these details are executive session topics, not topics for public discussion. The nature, the details of our security system are a topic for executive session, not a topic for open session.
The point Mr. Green is making that there are some aspects of the high school security that we wouldn't want to be made public. That was all the point that he's making.
I appreciate that point, thank you, and apologies for any overstep.
I have a quick question. I know there were some issues at the beginning of the year with fights at football games, and I haven't heard anything recently. So does that mean that the problems have ironed themselves out, or Where are we with that?
So, I've been priding myself on transparency, so unfortunately, I had to be transparent 2 days in a row, which probably made the problem seem worse than it was at the beginning of the year, but we have not had anything significant since that time. In fact, the football games have been pretty fun, the school culture's pretty good, after school is even pretty nice. It's again, I don't want to jinx anything here, but we've had a really, really nice couple of weeks, and things feel like they have definitely shifted.
I'm very glad to hear that. Dr. Phillips?
Through you, Chair, I just want to thank all three of you for your incredibly hard work. You're doing wonderful things with our kids and the culture and our middle and high schools, or alternative middle school and high school, so thank you very much.
All right, I think that is, Mr. Green?
I just wanted to build on Dr. Phillips' comments. As you pointed out, Ms. Kirsten, you were here in the spring to discuss school security. My concern then was that we didn't want to give a narrative to the public of unsafe schools, which I don't think that ours are. I know that incidents since then have led to at least some chatter about a general culture of wayward youth, which I think is deeply inaccurate and does not describe the Somerville experience. I want to thank you for the attention you pay to our youth issues and the framing of which, based on relationships, based on caring about our kids. If we had more structures like that, we'd have fewer problems. I just want to thank you. So I want to thank you for your work.
Mr. Bitton? And then, did you want to comment?
I just wanted to, that's part of the reason why our esteemed colleagues are here, because I wanted to make sure that we tell the story, the right story. And what I heard multiple times was the idea of developing relationships. It's easy to post things in Facebook, but it's really complicated to create a space where every child is seen and heard. And so at the center really of any culture is how those interactions. And so that's what we're trying to do. The design of the community members or the community outreach members is like that. And so I think that we're trying to intentionally foster those relationships, and I wanted to make sure that we get ahead of the story. So we tell the real story of the folks who are doing the work day in and day out.
Can I not add on to that?
Please.
I'm both always a little bit sad but pleased. During our open houses in February, we have a lot of parents come from the younger grades to tour the schools, and they're always sort of shocked and surprised at how sort of peaceful and pleasant the high school environment is. And I'm not quite sure what they're expecting, but people come on any given day. It's really sort of a pleasant, fun, lovely environment. So again, I get a little disappointed, but I'm also proud of our school. That is what you will find. On most days, at any given time, you'll find a very pleasant environment in both schools.
So I'll take Ms. Bitton, she hasn't spoken yet, and then Mr. Bitton, and then Mr. Green.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I would like if someone, any of you, first of all, thank you for being here, just to talk a little bit about the change in culture when we went from security personnel to community engagement specialists. I think this is something that's really been very valuable to the school, and I really want to promote that and hear it in your words so that other members of the public understand what we do differently now and how it has enhanced relationships and the culture in the school.
Go ahead, you go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, I can't really speak too much to that because Next Wave and Full Circle, when we lived over at the Edgerly, we did not have what are they called?
Community engagement.
No, well, we didn't have community engagement specialists, but we didn't have security. We didn't have resource officers. So, and when we moved into the new building, there was no resource officer. So, but I will say, having a community engagement specialist has been huge, and it is such an incredible addition to our staff because that person, you know, my teachers are teaching, the clinicians are meeting with kids and doing the therapeutic supports, and the dean is doing a lot of the behavior management, and the community engagement specialist is doing so much of this like wraparound, and we only have one, you know, we're small, but doing a tremendous amount of like getting to know the students. He knows their schedules, he knows where they're supposed to be. If I'm looking for a kid, Carl's, where should I, you know, like he just knows everything, and it also helps that my community engagement specialist is a former Next Wave student who graduated from Somerville High School, so like he's in, and he's a football coach, so he's just like really invested in the community and invested in our kids. So it has just been a tremendous addition. And as Alicia was saying earlier, when people come visit Next Wave, we have the same response. People are often shocked at how quiet it is, how much kids are engaged in their classrooms. Again, I know people have this perception of what alternative ed might be, but it really isn't what's percolating in their brains, and that we have been a model across the state and across New England. I have hosted many schools over the past several years to come visit us and to learn from us about our teacher counselor model, about how we manage our student behaviors, how we structure our alternative school day, and so I want to highlight that. There is just so much great stuff going on, both at Somerville High and at Next Wave Full Circle, that, unfortunately, the loudest activity sometimes makes the biggest news, but that's not really what's happening on the day-to-day at either of our locations. I don't know if you want to speak more about the resource officers or...
No, I also was not principal with resource officers, so I cannot speak to that at all. But the community engagement specialist model is, to reinforce what Dr. Carmona was saying, it's about relationships. I mean, first of all, we have, to echo what Margaret said, just a tremendous staff, 3 of whom are former students, one who's a football coach, and they just build the relationships, know the students, get ahead of everything that happens. If something does happen, they have the information about what happened like that. And they're also doing the outside security. We did have nothing nefarious, but a couple of kids, I think they must be from local or at a charter school, try to come into the school a couple times. Nothing nefarious, nothing scary, no malintentions, but our community engagement specialist had them like that. A couple kids told us who they were. I called over to their school. Like, it's just the relationships, and you get ahead of anything before it happens. And I think that's just a good example of how it works.
Mr. Bitone and then Mr. Green.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Ms. Green, I wanted to pull on the thread of something you said a little earlier around students feeling like it's home. Mm-hmm. That's how we want it to feel.
Yeah.
But of course, we know school isn't home. Students are dismissed at a certain time. Would you be able to talk a little bit more about how, collectively you, how you work with, once students are dismissed, mm-hmm. How is that handoff to community to provide additional wraparound services after students leave the building, if at all? What is our role there in communicating with, parents, with community leaders?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think that everyone always asks, like, when does the clock kind of stop at school and start elsewhere? Our students, we do have students that are engaged in after-school programming. We do have students that have jobs. They often wait. Some jobs don't start till 4, so there's a lot of downtime. Some of the athletics don't start till 4, so there is some wait time. So the handoff isn't as clean and easy. It's not like goodbye. Certainly, we try to monitor our kids. If we hear of something going on the walk home from school, unfortunately, that kind of stuff does happen, and we do intervene the best we can. We have walked students home before if they are feeling unsafe. And my team is the ability to do that because we are small, and we can kind of catch those interruptions when they happen. And we often, if we have students that are feeling unsafe ever, sometimes we let them leave school a little bit early. We communicate with parents around pickups. Next Wave Full Circle, where we have that horseshoe right off of School Street, so we do have some parents that come in right there to pick up their kids. The train is right there, so we can certainly assist students in coming and going if they're ever feeling unsafe and leaving school a little bit early. I do know, I talk to my students beginning of September around what do you want after school? Because not everyone engages in a club or a sport. There are some students that really are kind of wandering, don't have much to do. A lot of kids, the response I got in the committee that I run, my student government committee, was they would love a drop-in center. They would love, one student described the Boys and Girls Club, because he's familiar with that model. And I know Somerville used to have the Boys and Girls Club, it doesn't have it anymore, but he was describing that kind of model of like a place where we can go, where like we can just chill and like maybe play video games. And then another student chimed in, it's like, I would love to just go and have a quiet place to read. I know the teen center exists, but a lot of kids are, they're not clear on how to join the teen center or where to find it. So I think that's something, I think larger than the schools, but definitely the city as a community, like what do our teens have access to? And I'm talking more of like my teens and not so much my middle school, but my teenagers who are kind of waiting for that job to start and it doesn't start till 4, or they're not really on the athletic side of things, or they're not really into the clubs, but they still want to hang out in a safe place because they don't have anywhere to go sometimes until parent gets home. Yeah.
Well, there is the library right next to the high school that is now open right after school
And
for
I
them
will
to
say,
hang out in.
I will just say this, I will just touch on the library just briefly, because we have had students that have successfully utilized the library. The library does have a teen room and a game center, and last year we had members from the library team come over. We have a weekly all-school meeting on Wednesdays, and Ellen from the youth room, whatever it's called, the teen room, thank you, would come over and present to our students. She would give us the monthly, list of activities. She got to know our students. So, I do think there's a good number of kids that do know how to use the library and know how to access it, and then there are some kids that don't. And so we do rely on that partnership with the library to figure that piece of things out.
Yeah, no follow-up? Okay. And then
Through the chair, I just, as someone who lived like a stone's throw from where Margaret's school used to be, I can speak firsthand to the one, in the many years I lived there, incident of children getting into a physical altercation. Her students, they may have graduated, but I reached out. Margaret, figured out who it was, had talked to them, but within, less than 24 hours, and was like, we saw the escalation, and here's what it is, and here's how we're handling it. And I've always been impressed. Thank you to all of you. I love hearing about this, but I've always been impressed with, Next Wave and Full Circle, but firsthand, to Mr. Bitone's point and his questions, they are looking out for these kids, and if the kids need support, if they find out about it, they're there supporting.
So I have Mr. Green and then Ms. Barish.
Sure, I wanted to speak to the surprise people feel about how peaceful and the schools are. Because it was a reaction I had my first time touring it 9 years ago. This is the first time touring both buildings 9 years ago now. And I think it comes from, we all as parents have this subconscious belief that our kids' education looks sort of like ours did. And certainly when I was in high school in the 90s, and the real rise of school is prison, my high school treated us like we're animals. And not surprisingly, we oftentimes acted like we were animals. So the thing that was immediately clear to me the first time I was in Somerville High, and it's been clear every time I've been in since, every time I've been in Next Wave Full Circle, is the culture of respect. That it's clear that our educators and our administrators respect the students, and in return, they get respect in return. And yeah, sure, we're still dealing with teenagers, and oftentimes they have more hormones in the sense, but the respect that they have for each other and for the school is always the thing that strikes me when I come in. And I know that that's not accidental. That's a culture that has been built over years and it takes a lot of hard work. And I'm glad to see that people see it when they visit.
Yeah. Ms. Barish?
The idea of school culture has come up a couple times, and I know we're only just barely a month into the school year, but I'm just wondering, I guess especially for Ms. Kirsten, have you noticed a shift in culture that you can sort of associate with the changes in cell phone use or cell phone not use?
Say yes.
Or please, Principal Green, I didn't mean to leave you out. I just
No,
didn't know.
they're doing the same thing that we are, or I think even a little more strictly. You can see it when you walk by classrooms, for sure. But we are trying this approach, I think similar to Andre was saying, that we're trying it of not take everything away. You know, you sort of, we'll meet you part way. You can have it during passing period. You can have it at lunch, you know. But in the classrooms, when you walk by, you definitely notice a difference. We're going to do a survey of students, staff, and families at the end of Q1, but anecdotally, I've even had students tell me they like it much better, and definitely teachers are saying, oh, I feel like I'm teaching again. But I don't know necessarily that it's having any impact. I don't know if there's a correlation between that and the impact on school culture, because they can still get on their cell phones and, you know, do whatever it is they're going to do between passing periods and before and after school and lunch.
Yeah, I would just agree with what Alicia just said, and yeah, once they get their phones back, they have to hurry up and check before you get to the next class on the phones, but students are much more engaged in their classes, the conversations. Teachers are just been super impressed with the level of discourse they're having with their students because the phones are gone. They're no longer engaged with them in class.
That's great. Ms. Parrish, do you want to follow?
I just wanted to say I didn't realize that Next Wave and Full Circle had also made a shift this year, so I didn't mean to exclude you.
All right, if there are, Ms. Patel?
Just quickly through you, what is the actual policy now? Can you share that?
Yeah, so we didn't change ours. We just enforced it a little more strictly. I'm very familiar with the handbook now after last year. All it is that when you come into class, you don't see cell phones, and they can keep it in their bag, or we purchased the shoe holders, and so you just don't see it. And if we don't see it, there's no issue. If a teacher sees it, they're supposed to remind them that they can either put it in their bag or put it away. And if it continues to be an issue, they can go turn it into the communities for the rest of the day. And then they can get them on the way out or take them out of their bags between passing period. But just in class, nobody's got their phones. But it's not different. We're enforcing it a little bit differently, with the shoe holder, but it's not different than it has been in our handbook for a few years.
I also want to add to that it's not unfamiliar to them by the time they come to the high school, because in our middle schools, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we are collecting cell phones every morning in every school. So they're sort of used to that by now when they come up to the high school.
Dr. Heckman?
Thank you, through the chair. Just to reinforce sort of the strategy that you've shared is best practice. In my day job, I do site visits all over, and there's multiple schools in Springfield. They had like the pouches that got locked, and one of the teachers joked that she was like, if we want our students problem solving, that was great because they figured every strategy possible to open those pouches, like in the most creative ways possible. And it, the policy, the investment in the pouches was unsuccessful. That the treating humans like animals isn't, like giving them autonomy, having rules, consequences, they get reinforced is, a best practice. So thank you, and I'm glad that's working.
Yes, when we did a little bit of research to see if we wanted to change it, the articles that were out there just in the ed magazines were saying that basically anything you do works. In some schools doing the under pouches, some schools doing what we're doing, but we also just have students who have a lot of responsibilities, job responsibilities for siblings. A lot of our students have medical devices, monitoring their medical devices on their phones, and so based on the research we saw, this seems to work in a lot of schools, and we chose, it seemed like a little easier lift than yonder pouches, cheaper too. But we'll check in at the end of the quarter with everybody and see how it's going.
Great. Well, thank you. It looks like that concludes this presentation.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you. So I don't know if you're familiar with the fact that we recently have the MCAS release the accountability numbers. So I'm going to have Dr. Jessica Boston Davis introduce the next rep from our building.
Thank you, Superintendent Carmona. So in just a moment, I'm going to invite our Director for Data, Accountability, and Assessment, Samantha Elegine, to come up. So as you know, as Dr. Carmona just said, last month, DESE released our annual MCAS scores and the accountability data for districts across the Commonwealth. And while our district shows overall relatively stable scores since 2023, the investments and goals we regularly share with you all are proposed major factors in continuing to address academic recovery following the COVID pandemic. And in releasing the data last month, Education Secretary Tutwiler said, in a quote, "Change in education is a process, not an event. The road back from the pandemic is not short." And so we really felt like that quote resonated with our results within our district as well as across the Commonwealth. So remembering those words, I'm going to invite our Director of Data Assessment and Accountability up to present the MCAS results.
Hello, good evening. I'm here to just give, as Dr. Boston Davis mentioned, a kind of quick highlights review of our MCAS and accountability results for spring of 2024. Next slide, please. Perfect. So right here we have a table that just really shows the percent of students meeting or exceeding expectations, both for the spring 2024 MCAS and the spring 2023 MCAS, with that last column showing you the difference between the two scores. So kind of the key takeaways here is that there's been an increase in the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations for students in 5th grade on the science MCAS, and for 8th grade students across all the subject areas, math, ELA, and science. At the same time, we've seen a decrease in the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations in 4th through 7th grade math and in 7th grade ELA. Next slide, please. Now here we just have a quick comparison showing the average SGP for students in grades 3 through 8 and for our high school level students as well. As a quick refresh, our student growth percentiles really tells us about how a student has performed and grown relative to peers across the state that have performed similarly in previous MCAS assessments. And so data that we have from DESE tells us that when students have an average SGP from 40 to 60, that puts them in the moderate growth range. And as you can see from the charts here, throughout the years, our SGP is typically within that range, which points to moderate growth, and the same can be said for spring of 2024. Next slide, please. Perfect. Now here we have a visual that really breaks down the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations across the years, but by demographic subgroup. So going across the bottom, we have our students with disabilities, our ELs, which are our multilingual learners, former ELs, which are our former multilingual learners, low income, which defined by the state are students that participate in state-run programs like SNAP, expanded mass health, foster care, etc. We have high needs, which are students that are one or more of the following, from a low-income household, a multilingual learner, a former multilingual learner, or a student with a disability. And so the kind of big highlight that we can see here is that there's definitely an opportunity gap that we see among the different subgroups of students, most notably among our multilingual learners, our students with disabilities, our Black and Hispanic or Latino students, high needs, low income, and this is a consistent gap that we see across the state as well. Right now, this is really just looking at grades 3 through 8 ELA data, but if we go on to the next slide, we see the same trend in our grades 3 through 8 math data, and if we go to the next slide, we also see the same trend in our 5th and 8th grade science data. And so, as I mentioned before, this is really a trend that holds across the state, this opportunity gap, and is definitely an area of focus for us as we review the MCAS data and additional data points that we have as well to adjust instruction to meet students' needs. Next slide, please. Now this slide is really breaking down a similar visual, but for our high school level data. So looking at our ELA, looking at our math data and our science data, again, consistent with what we see at the state level. There are definitely gaps in performance among our different subgroups of students. Next slide, please. And so moving on to our accountability results, just to give a quick refresh, the state accountability system It basically gives schools an idea of how they're making progress towards targets that the state has set for us in different indicator areas. The indicators include achievement on the MCAS, growth on the MCAS, progress made in English language proficiency as measured by the Access Assessment, as well as additional indicators such as chronic absenteeism, advanced coursework completion, and I believe that's the last indicator, yes. And so looking at this table here, the kind of key takeaways here is that all of our schools across the district made moderate to substantial progress towards their targets that were set for their school, which is good to see. And as a district overall, we also made moderate progress towards the accountability targets that were set for us. Another area of note is the accountability percentiles, which you can see all the way on the right of this table. And that really is a measure that's more so telling us how are we doing compared to other schools serving similar grade levels of students across the state. And so when we review the accountability system or accountability data for this year, we did have 3 schools that were found requiring assistance or intervention. This is a designation that can be given for multiple reasons. So for instance, Next Wave was found requiring assistance or intervention due to low assessment participation on standardized assessments for the state, so MCAS or Access. And because of the small class size or the small population size at the school, it's basically 2 students, which can cause them to fall into that designation. And then we also had the East Somerville Community School, which was found as requiring assistance or intervention, and that was due to low performance of one particular subgroup at the school. And the Winter Hill was found requiring assistance or intervention because they fell into the 9th percentile of schools serving similar grade levels of students at the state level. So we definitely, whenever we receive this information, especially the preliminary data, take the time to meet with the principals. We review data together, we ask questions, we try to understand why we've reached this designation and create a plan forward of how we plan to address it, whether that's through the school improvement plan or other methods as well. And so this is something that we're all aware of and working to adjust to. Yep, next slide, please. Thank you. And so I'm definitely a big believer in reviewing data and taking a very action-oriented mindset as a result of that data. And so the question at the top of all of our minds is really, what are we going to do to advance students on the path to academic recovery and to reduce the opportunity gaps that we see in the accountability and the MCAS data? So these are just a few of the things that we plan to do to address these things. That includes things like launching a new math and literacy curriculum. And that part of that work is a grades K through 5 literacy needs assessment and a 3 through 5 year literacy plan. We also are using our CPT time and really taking a data-driven focus, which aligns with our core value, right, as mentioned in our strategic plan, really using data to inform our work and to make adjustments, as well as alignment of the district and school priorities to support the whole child. And again, this is that alignment of strategic plan with school improvement plans and making sure that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. And then we have deepening of support around Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction, right? So supporting our educators and delivering that quality instruction to our students, continued implementation of the iReady online assessment, which is in its 2nd year here in the district, and which also has a very high correlation with the MCAS assessment. So really being able to use that as a progress monitoring tool throughout the year with our students, as well as the launch of the personalized instruction component of iReady as well. And then district alignment of our multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS system, to really make sure that we're supporting students and their individual unique needs. And with that, I close my presentation and welcome any questions.
Great. Thank you so much for that presentation. I will start with myself, which is just when you talk about the state saying they're going to assist or intervene, what does that look like from the state?
Yeah, of course. So that kind of varies depending on the reason behind the requiring assistance or intervention. So in Next Wave's instance, for example, they just kind of provide resources around encouraging students to make sure that they show up to school so that they can test in the relevant assessments that they have to take. In the case of the East Somerville and the East Somerville and Winter Hill community schools, the state is going to be meeting with us and helping us think through how can we use our school improvement planning process as a tool to improve outcomes for the students. So in the East case of that particular subgroup of students, and in the Winter Hills case of the school overall. So like really honing down, looking at our data and thinking about what interventions and supports need to be implemented.
And does that come with any funding if they find there are interventions that are needed?
Yeah, so it actually does sound like there are grants available for schools that have been found requiring assistance or intervention. So that's part of the meeting process with them of identifying those grants and applying for that support so that we can fund whichever interventions are needed.
Great, thank you so much. Other questions? Mr. Baton?
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thank you. I love when you present to us. I love your charts. I have a few questions, but I'll be gentle to the rest of my colleagues and just ask the main one. In the first of your slides you showed, or the first set of slides you showed the gap between different groups. Sorry, if you could go forward maybe two more. Yeah, and, you know, we have gaps between different subgroups in our district, across multiple different subject areas. You know, my eyes started to sort of glaze looking at each of them. We see the same patterns, and we see the same patterns statewide. So clearly, what we're doing in this particular element to try to close that gap between different subgroups, we have more work to do. The communities across the state have more work to do. Are there any communities comparable to ours, districts comparable to ours, that you know of or that your team is looking at that are making more progress in terms of closing those gaps? And what do we have to learn from those districts?
That's a great question. I would say that often when we think about what districts to compare ourselves to, I think we instantly jump to the neighboring districts, but we don't really have that many neighboring districts that are pretty comparable to us. I'd say the one that I usually look to that is kind of similar in terms of demographics of students that are served is Medford Public Schools, and so compared to them, I'd say that we're doing well, but again, I try to resist the urge to compare ourselves to other school districts, just because I kind of have that belief of like focusing on our improvement. And I do agree with like looking at best practices. So like I've definitely in past years looked at schools or districts that have kind of recovered compared to where they were pre-COVID and looked at what different interventions or resources they've cited as helping them reach that goal. A lot of those districts don't necessarily have the same population as us, but I can say that we are using a lot of the similar interventions. So thinking of iReady personalized instruction and thinking of the iReady assessment and using that information to make adjustments to instruction to support students, thinking of the interventionists and specialists and these resources that we have. So I do feel like we have a lot of the right ingredients in place to make progress for our students. So
I have Mr. Green and then Dr. Phillips and then Ms. Baton. Mr. Green?
Actually, I'll let Dr. Phillips go first.
Thanks, through you, Chair. I just wanted to offer like two things as someone who works in education, but yet really knows the limits of trying to close achievement gaps through education. I just wanted to point out two things. One is the correlation between this year's accountability percentile, right? So like Winter Hill is a 9, Brown is a 90. The correlation between that and the percent of low-income students in a school last fall is 0.8, right? That's like so high that it's like the same thing. Like a researcher like me or Emily would say, that's the same thing that you're measuring there with the accountability percentile is who are you serving? The other point I wanted to make is just researchers generally say that like for any student outcome, 2/3 of that is determined by stuff that happens outside of school. Only 1/3 of that is stuff that happens in school. So unless we're really addressing poverty, we're not going to close the achievement gaps.
Mr. Green?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Phillips. I figured you were going to make the same point I was going to make, only with actual data, more recent data points than I had to hand, so I appreciated that. But yeah, I think we have to remember there are two separate things going on here that are all actually compounded by a third thing. One is that there is the existence of achievement gaps, which, to your question, Mr. Patone, my best data says that no one has actually solved that problem. Because the real problem is that we don't educate poor kids well. No one does. So as Dr. Phillips pointed out, really when you're seeing these huge gaps, what you're really seeing is a system that punishes schools for having the audacity to try to teach poor kids rather than rich kids. And then there's the other issue, which is the comparing us to the before times, which I want to remind people of two things. One, arguably we were teaching poor kids, and certainly our English language learner kids tend to be more fragile when they're newcomers than they were before time. And we had a pandemic that disproportionately landed on low-income families and black and brown families. So there's a huge level of trauma, which, going back into Dr. Phillips' point, about 2/3 of things being things, we as a society haven't willing to address head on. We're trying to pretend it didn't happen. We're trying to go back to a status quo that pretends that we never had COVID. And until we as a society are willing to address that, 1 million people, mostly poor, black and brown, died and are still dying. We're not going to get to the things we need to do to actually help learning loss, which, to wrap things up, is also, we got to remember, a made-up problem. Like comparing, like learning loss assumes that there's a right way for kids to develop. I don't care if kids are not developing the same way they were before COVID. I care that we're meeting them where they are now, and that we're addressing the needs as they are now. And that means taking longer for them to learn to read, so be it. The problem, the style we all use, I use it too, is, if you can't read by 3rd grade, your odds of success in life plummet. The largest reason for that is because most places, most districts, if you aren't reading by 3rd grade, they give up on you. We stop trying to teach you. There's nothing magical about that moment other than the fact that we as a district, because we have scarce resources and different priorities, have to change our approach for students who have fallen behind at that point. But when we're talking about entire cohort stuff falling behind, that speaks to changing how we measure success and changing what we do to be successful. As I mentioned earlier, we have a tendency to believe that school should work basically the way it worked for us, and it should look basically the way it worked for us. And we haven't yet, as a society, accepted that for the children who went through a trauma, unlike anything any of us have any experience, we have to make school look different, and we haven't done that. So I think that's what this data tells me, is that until we are actually willing to make real changes, which I want to thank you for that last slide, because it shows a district that's looking to make real changes, we're not going to see real changes in results.
I'll chime in quickly. Thank you for the references. I totally, agree with all the points around. MCAS is a measurement of your zip code. Mainly, there's a high correlation, and it's also a data point. So we will use it as a data point. I know right now there is a ballot initiative to try to take away the punitive side of the MCAS. I think that we are fully on board with that idea, because there's a lot of punitive elements on how these rankings happen. The thing that I wanted to say is that, yes, and I just want to remind everyone that we just instituted a new literacy program, that the science of reading is catching very slowly, and that's part of also the truth, is that sometimes some of these developments trickle down into the classroom very slowly. And also, what we are looking at sometimes as deficits, I want to really caution everyone that, there are some categories here that are double counted. A student that who is a newcomer not just because they have an inability to process information, but it's just they don't have the access. And when you mingle all these numbers together, that ends up in a lower average. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have to do better for the kids. We do, and actually, those poor families that we're talking about, families that are asking, looking at the district and say, listen, you're basically my game in town. I need you to do better for me. And that's one of the conversations I had with some families during the Hispanic Heritage Month on Saturday. And, you know, one of the things that I want them to know is that we are here for them, that this body also is here to listen to them, and barely ever we hear their voices coming and saying, hey, help me get my education and advance the needs of my kids. So yes to all of the arguments that I heard. We also use that information to improve, and I think there are areas of improvement that we have identified before, and we are in that trajectory. So thank you for bringing that up, and also, Sam, thank you for your eloquent way to share this information in a way that is easy for all of us to digest.
Follow up, and then I have all three of you. Go ahead.
I want to thank you, Dr. Carmona, and I want to be clear that I am not by any means suggesting anything other than absolutely we as a district and we as a society have to do better by our most vulnerable students. I just want to make sure that we're actually identifying the right problems, which is not necessarily a failure of instruction, but a failure of us as a city, district, society to provide the services that students actually need to close these gaps.
I had Ms. Patone, Mr. Bitone, and then Dr. Ackman.
Thank you, through you, Chair. You know, thanks to my colleagues for putting all this context that we have been well aware that MCAS is generally a reflection of demographics and not necessarily the quality of the education. However, I think historically, when a school got identified as requiring assistance or intervention, it ended up being a higher level of accountability. And there was a lot more reporting, there was a lot more resources that had to be expended to kind of prove to the state that we were struggling. I don't know if that's changed a lot, so that's my first part of the question is has that changed? And the second part of the question is, are there, you know, in the context of all this, are there additional things we're going to be doing for these particular schools to try to get them out of that spotlight? You know, it may be all the things we're already doing, which is totally great, but I'm just curious if they're in a higher level of accountability, there is more attention, are we providing more resources to those schools to be able to serve the state and what they're looking for?
Dr. Ackman, did you have an answer to the first question?
Thank you. Just to the first one, and this is, again, day job and like from the state perspective. So it is the lowest 10% of growth gets identified for like one level of accountability, but then it is the lowest 10% of the lowest 10% that have that targeted investment. And so none of, as long as I've been on school committee, none of Somerville schools have qualified, but that the lowest 10% of the lowest 10% those are the ones with like, that have some mandatory. And other than that, it is like grants, there's more resources available, but nothing required. Is there anything else?
Answer that second question about if we're doing it. The question was just what else are we doing internally?
So I know that there's something that was highlighted in the last slide. So do you mind bringing that up just to kind of highlight a couple of things? And I just, we have a meeting on Friday with the Department of Ed, so we will know a little bit better. We can actually share. I know in my conversation with them, they said it's not as punitive as it used to be, but we will know better on Friday. So there are a couple of things here in this slide. You know, just the MTSS process is one thing that I've described before as a very complex process. It's one thing that we actually have to do better, to norm better, and that's one thing that systematically will generate, in my mind, some different outcomes. But many of these things that are here also we're just in the launching process of different of our initiatives. We're in the math, fully rolling out a math plan that is still grades 3 and 4 in full implementation. Next year will be a dedicated full implementation for all the schools. The same thing goes with literacy. So I just, in terms of what's happening, I think there are multiple fronts in which we're working to accelerate or to make sure that teachers are more comfortable with the content that they're dealing with.
Mr. Bitone, and then Dr. Ackman.
Thank you, Chair, through you. I want to thank Superintendent Carmona for speaking to this about the event on Saturday, listening to families from Los Padres Latinos, and I was glad to see you there. I think the listening is key. I think listening to perspectives and listening to the data. You know, to Mr. Green's point, I think, you know, and I was sort of expecting this answer that there aren't any communities that have figured this out. You know, so I guess that's not a terrible surprise to me, but we still, you know, we're looking at the data in this way for a reason, right? We need to identify the gaps, and we can't just throw up our hands and say, there's nothing we can do. And I don't think anyone on this committee is suggesting that. I'm just trying to tease out, which I think you are as well, what are the data trying to tell us, and what actions will be most effective for us to take to address the continued discrepancies and also the overall decline in the numbers. And again, they don't tell us everything. They tell us hardships have happened. But you know, there are differences between, for instance, science and math in the overall trends. So that's interesting to me as well. So anyway, I again appreciate all the work that the district is doing, and in continuing to tease apart these numbers to find the right solutions. So thank you.
Dr. Ackman?
Thank you. Through the chair, first off, deep appreciation for you, Director Elagine, for being here. I really appreciate Dr. Boston Davis's quote from who runs the Department of Ed? From the person who runs the Department of Ed.
Tutwiler.
Thanks. Oh, it was Tutwiler. Oh, wow, even better. All right, from the person, I thought it was the federal. Thank you. Yes. So, a few things that I wanted to sort of add on that I want to make sure are on the record is the MCAS are like noted for being racist and not taking away the racist questions. So there are racist questions that are like have proven without a doubt to, you know, be like answer, you know, equally capable Black and brown students aren't getting, are due to language, are not getting the same results based on the wording of questions. My understanding is those have not been stricken from MCAS yet. I also wanted to note that cut scores have changed. And unfortunately, Mr. Bitone had to go, but one of the things that I wanted to commend the district in doing, and one of the things that I think we're doing that is and will continue to improve outcomes, is noting that students seeing themselves in the curriculum, which we have no impact on for MCAS, has value to students' learning, and the fact that my understanding is that more and more that is a very concerted effort, which I think is going to continue to yield results. I wanted to add, you know, we're gonna talk about the superintendent's evaluation, but I wanted to add the side note of the communication from Dr. Carmona for making families feel welcome has just gone up and up and up in the time you've been here. I'm very thankful for it. I also wanted to note and celebrate that there was, from what I saw, moderate or substantial growth at every school towards the target percentages. You know, that is, there is certainly areas of growth, but like moderate and substantial growth towards targeted percentages is good. And like we, you know, can't take our foot off the gas, but I think we should pause and celebrate. After that soliloquy, with that in mind, to Dr. Phillips' point about, you know, the Brown having a 90% accountability, Winter Hill having 9, I did notice that the Healy was, my understanding, it was the most diverse school that had made substantial growth towards their target, based on my understanding. And I'm wondering, to that point, if the makeup of the school has changed, or if they're actually making, like, you know, if there's anything else that are external factors that can explain that, or if they're continuing to make substantial growth. Does that make sense after my?
Yeah, no, through the chair. So what you said makes sense. To my knowledge, there have not been substantial changes in terms of like the makeup of the school. I will say that last year they were also making substantial progress towards targets, which is great to see. To answer your question, yeah.
Right. If there are no further questions, thank you for joining us this evening. Dr. Carmona?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to ask, I'm going to have equity. There's a conversation about equity in sports in our district. I have been asked that multiple times, and I thought, who would be better to answer that question than our very best athletic director, Stanley Vieira? And I'm going to have him share an equity and access for our SPS athletics. So we're incredibly fortunate to have an athletics program that offers a very wide variety of opportunities for our students to participate in, and an athletic director who is both proactive in instituting innovative opportunities as well as responsive to the hopes and interests of our students. I'd like to invite Mr. Vieira to present an overview of our programs and the department's work and the amazing opportunities we have for equitable access to sports. So thank you, Mr. Vieira.
It's okay with everybody. I'm going to have Principal Kirsten.
Yep, this is our joint presentation. You'll notice on the date, starting my second year in this role, I started also getting questions about equity in athletics, but I'll be honest, they were very general questions. Specifically, we got some ones around gender, but in general, just general questions about equity in athletics. As I hope you know, equity is something that's important to me, and I try to look at everything through an equity lens, and the same is true for Stan. So we sat down, and the one new thing, if you go to the next slide, please. We really tried to think through what we meant about equity in athletics, and we ended up on these categories. We are very open to other angles and other issues, but we were looking in terms of opportunity, in terms of access, allocation of resources, and quality of experience. You go to the next slide. So one thing we are doing, and we actually did it and then hit a wall, so we're going to be doing it again, is really trying to look at who participates on the athletic teams. I'm setting up a system to do this for all of our extracurriculars. We do this for our AP classes, our CTE programs, and athletics. We set up, well, with the help from Sarah, Joe, and Sam, set up a very cool tableau that you can click on there, and we looked at every single sport at that point. It hasn't been updated by demographics. One area we had been working on for a while, Stan had been working on for a while, was trying to remove barriers for our MLEs in terms of getting more help registering. What were the barriers? Trying to figure out what the barriers were either to registration, making sure they had their physicals, making sure we're always looking, I say we, I mostly say Stan, I should be speaking for you, but looking at income, if there's ever an issue where the student can afford any equipment. We have community and we have resources to be all over that, but we're really trying to look at who's playing, who has access to it, and removing as many barriers as possible. And I'm not going to go through it now, but you can click on that very cool tableau. If you go to the next slide, number of programs is the same. We've got about as of this data is a little old, but it was about 60% of our participants were boys, 40% girls, and we had 5 students who identified as non-binary. So you go to the next one. Just represented there in gender by the different seasons. Next slide. This is our demographic information and participation in sports compared with the demographics of our school in general. And as you can see in there, we know that there's lower access for low income, for MLE in particular. Those are 2 populations that we've really been working on. Next slide. This was actually surprising. I should have done this as a trivia. The team with the highest percentage of Latinx Hispanic students, which is one of our relatively lower groups with lower participation rate, is actually cheerleading. And Black students, boys basketball, low-income students, girls basketball, cheerleading, and football. MLE students, boys soccer, white students, golf, and greatest participation by female identifying athletes is soccer. There are 55, and this is not this year's data, last year's data. Again, Stan, I gotta tell you, working with Stan, I don't know if you all have the pleasure of working with Stan, keeps such careful records. Everything is so clearly organized, and we pulled this data when we were looking at it from a presentation he'd made previously to the school committee, and went through everything, like how much are we spending, is the school spending on looking at gender at the different teams. The charts are at the end of this presentation, but it's all, Stan is incredibly mindful of this. Who's getting what uniforms, how much is being spent, how often, and making sure that it's equitable between the boys and girls teams, which is what we were hearing last year, some questions about. I gotta tell you, even with the scheduling, who gets the 7 o'clock games, how many home games, how many away games, the closest fields, anything, because I gotta also tell you, working with Stan, I think out of any person in the whole school, he gets the most parent complaints, and so he has the answer to every question, and he has addressed anything anyone could ever complain about. What time, size uniform, all of these things, he's carefully looked at to make sure that it's even. Don't tell Kennedy, or was that, who, Kennedy? Don't tell them I just did that. All right, next slide. Same with coaches, same number of coaches, the level of experience the coaches have. Next slide. Is there another, we can go to the next slide. And just continue looking at everything, how many coaches there are, the level of experience they've had for all of the teams. Next slide, please. The uniform, as I told you, uniform cost, how much is spent on uniforms, how often teams get uniforms. Next slide. Equipment costs, obviously some sports are more expensive than others, but how often you're getting new uniforms and new equipment for is very thoughtfully taken care of. Next slide. One thing I do want to note, because we realized that some of the complaints, there's a difference between club sports and varsity sports in terms of funding. And the club sports we have, crew, cheerleading, and ultimate frisbee, get incredible support compared to some schools from the athletics department. They get coaches, they get support from Michelle the trainer, facilities, but a lot of, historically, and this is how it's done, club sports have to raise a lot more of their own funds than a varsity sport, so we realized that some of the concerns that were getting raised were just the difference between a varsity and a club sport. The other thing that I want to point out is that some sports have booster clubs, 501c3s that are not run by the school, track, cross country, boys basketball, hockey, and they fundraise for some of the additional gear and things that they have, where the other sports might not have that 501c3 that goes with it and get some of the additional. All the teams do fundraising, and all the money that they raise is deposited in the student activities accounts, which goes through the school, and they purchase different equipment and gear for the students through that. Next slide. Oh, and then equitable experience. Stan implemented recently student surveys that students fill out at the end of every season, and we monitor that to look at the experience that students are having. Next slide. But again, hopefully know me and know Stan. We are committed. If there are any issues or concerns or questions that are coming up, we are, of course, happy to look at them. We're going to continue working on removing the barriers that we see that are in place, and working to make sure that all of our students, any student who wants to participate, has access to that as well. And we are now open for questions.
Great. Thank you so much for that presentation. I have Dr. Ackman and then Ms. Barish.
Thank you so much. This is very informative and absolutely inspiring. Do you mind going back to the fundraising one more? Yes. So I'm curious, and I know this from a younger kid's perspective, that some of the student groups are able to, in the summer, run clinics that are also fundraisers for their teams. And I'm wondering, do you know how they get, so I can speak, my kids went to a clinic last summer that was put on by high school soccer, and it was a fundraiser for high school soccer, and I'm asking because I'm curious if that was like through the booster, but we were told when we paid the money to rec that money was going straight to the high school soccer team. So I'm curious if, like, in part because I assume club sports may want opportunities to do things like this, if you know how that happens and how those decisions are made.
I'd have to ask Michael, I probably want some more clarity. When you say, was it a girls' soccer clinic? Was it a boys' soccer clinic?
It was unisex. The participants, at least. I don't remember if the individuals running it were.
And was it through Somerville Recreation?
Yes, I can guarantee that I signed up through Somerville Rec. It was 3 days. And
I'd have to look, typically the MIAA has very specific rules around what our coaches can and cannot do in season and out of season.
it was the students, it wasn't the coaches.
So the students did it.
Run by high school students,
Yeah, I'd have to get some more information. I'm not familiar with it, regretfully. With the Recreation Department does a lot of initiatives in that, or programming in that respect, and I want to make sure, like when you say that the money went towards the girls' soccer program, but the coach was not involved in any capacity, that strikes me as...
Well, so I also would like to, because to me, again, from an equity perspective, if this is an opportunity that some groups are getting, I'm sure my kids would love to sign up for a clinic on, I don't know, Ultimate or anything else. So it's like, I'm glad that you'll learn more about it, but to me, like, I think it's great, and so I would love to hear about closing the loop on how it happens so that it, from an equity perspective, it can be made
Of course. I can tell you that those opportunities do exist, obviously. And from a 501(c)(3) standpoint, the programs here that have those have been in place for many, many years. Predates me, the Blue Liners for hockey, old standing 501(c) that have been in place for many, many years. The track pack for our track team, it's been in place for many, many years. Other than that, a few years back, we kind of cleaned up the situation as far as it made more sense for programs that didn't have a 501(c) to be internal at the high school, which makes a lot of sense. And it's under the umbrella of the Student Activities Department, which also makes it very clean and easy to pay for additional equipment or gear or things like that for our student athletes.
Thank you.
Of course.
Have Ms. Barish and then Mr. Green. Barish?
Thank you for this presentation. I do have a couple questions. First of all, I was surprised, but had to kind of check myself because football is listed as a girls' sport, which I assume means that girls are welcome to play. I see that there are 0 participating, and I'm curious about whether girls have participated in the past and whether there is like an outreach effort to encourage girls who might be interested to participate. And I'm also interested in, given the 0 on there now, I know there's a 0 on golf too, but I know that in recent history, girls have participated in golf. Given the 0 participation rate in football currently, I'm curious about whether you're looking at other opportunities that may attract more girls.
Sure, I can tell you that predates me as well, but over the last 10 or so years, we've had multiple females play football on our team. And currently in our league, there are teams, Medford, for example, I believe Malden, and I think Everett, back a few years ago, also have had females participate. We had a young student, a female, who was very interested in the last year and actually joined us in the off-season conditioning with the team and decided that she just didn't want to do it, So we do put that out there, and our hope is that that increases and with more awareness and the opportunity to actually do things in the off season, I think will also help kind of stop the anxiety, so to speak, of is this feasible, is this possible, is it too much? So no, I really want that to be something that's a really inclusive, open community. It's important to us, And I think our coaches do a wonderful job at making sure they're hitting the middle schools, they're going and really educating our kids on what it means to be a football player, not just football, but all of our sports, So there are opportunities, and again, it's not something that's foreign. We've had females. I believe my predecessor, Nicole Veely, told me during her 12 or 13 years that she was the athletic director, she had 5 or 6 females play football over the years. So it's very, very possible. Absolutely.
Do you have a follow-up or new question?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. I think it's terrific. I had the opportunity as a high school student to work out with the football team in the off season in the weight room, and the lifelong confidence that that's given me in sort of maintaining fitness and walking into a gym anywhere is really empowering. Look at me get emotional. And I just want to encourage, we have the beautiful weight room facilities, and I know that all of the teams have access to that. I saw that in here, that they have equal access, which is great. But I also hope that we can encourage students who may not be involved in athletics yet to take advantage of those facilities as well, because it really opens the door to lifelong fitness for these kids.
Thank you for that. And I also get emotional as well when it comes to fitness and what it gives back to students for the rest of their lives. And I can tell you that from our perspective, we recognized that very early on when we first opened the high school. And one of the things that was really important to us was making sure that students did feel comfortable. So from 2:45 to 4:45, Monday through Friday, it's an open block for anybody to come down. And Joe Angelo, one of our physical education teachers, is a certified strength coach. So I think the beauty of him being in there is that he's very hands-on, and it makes it very comfortable for students to understand what it means to work out and how to work out properly. I think the key thing with working out is not just doing it, but doing it properly, because it gives so much back to you, and the hope is that you pass it on to your family and so on and so on, and it's a wonderful resource that we have there. It really is. Thank you.
It's also, the room is also staffed from 7 to 7:45 every morning. Yeah, after school, it's actually Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, not on Wednesdays, from 2:45 to 4:45, but every morning from 7 a.m. to 7:45, it's open, and we have a group of students who uses it pretty regularly, or different students at different seasons. We have a couple staff members who get a stipend, who aren't part of the athletics or PE group, who staff it in the morning, and then a really wonderful teacher who staffs it in the afternoon.
I had Mr. Green, Ms. Patone, and then Dr. Phillips. Mr. Green?
Thank you for this. Actually, I guess building off of Ms. Barish's excellent points, it's not surprising that, despite our efforts in equity, we still have an athletic population that is richer, whiter, and apparently more male than the student population as a whole. And this is, I think, to you, but I think mostly to superintendent and maybe even to the city. As the father of a black girl, I have found that part of the problem is that it's really hard to get your young child started. Like, especially, I think things like golf. If you aren't doing golf on your own time, you're not doing golf till you're in high school. And so I'm not surprised that it's 88% white, right? Like, these are, so I say all to say, like, I want us to be thinking deeply about how do we make it easier, earlier for kids to get exposed to these sports and athletic in organized ways? Because frankly, for most students, but if they haven't been doing it by high school, in most sports it's too late for them to really start. That said, and this is definitely through you to superintendent, I also want us as leadership to finally tackle the question that I've been asking for 9 years now, and I still haven't got a good answer to, which is, as a district, what do you think the point of our athletic program is, and therefore how are we measuring whether or not we're doing a good job? Like, I don't believe we've ever felt that the point is winning championships. That's great and all, but we have never been structured, I come from Louisiana, where that is absolutely a point of a school athletic team, and it's structured accordingly. The football coach is a full-time position in the high school, and it's resourced accordingly and judged by wins and losses. It's clear that's not how we measure the value of our athletic department. But, like, how do we measure, obviously on logistics and health and all these things that are very important, you're doing a fantastic job. But, like, as a district, how are we resourcing things in athletics? As an answer, I can't answer if we're doing it well or not, because I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish. And I would love to have that conversation.
I could just, if it's okay, thank you. I think one of the things that we recognized years ago, since I've gotten to Somerville High School, one of the things that we're very proud of is our middle grades athletic program. But to be very frank with you, I feel like that's not even early enough. I think one of the things we're really missing in the city, and it's something that I know I talked to Principal Kirsten about this, is what can we do better to partner with our recreation department to tap into students in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, where they really have access and say, okay, this is something that I really want to do. I get a ton of emails from parents who say, my child's in the 4th grade, they don't have a lot of running options. Is there anything I can do? You know, where can I put my student to run? He or she is an unbelievable runner or has a lot of passion. So I think there's an opportunity here for us to really build on something, you know, beyond the before the middle grade levels, to really get students interested and give them access to see, because I know you know this, I know all you know this, where a child falls into as far as falling in love with a sport could come at any point. It's really fascinating, it really is, and I want to make sure we provide those resources.
Thank you for that. I especially want, because like I know that my 5th grader decided last year that she wanted to explore basketball, and already feels like she started too late because she can't find a place for like to learn basketball with her peers. Is either learn it with 4-year-olds, which no 10-year-old wants to do, or try to play with her peers who've all been playing for 5-6 years, and she feels humiliated. So like we've got to find more entry ways.
Dr. Phillips, Ms. Barish, and then Ms. Rito.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really enjoying this conversation with the colleagues and hearing what everybody has to say. I'm like basically knocking things off my list as all of my very thoughtful colleagues bring things up, and as well as the two of you. I did want to just make one reference to some success around, for example, middle school volleyball for females. Like that has grown from what I've seen tremendously. And I think that, you know, the work that I know that the superintendent wants to embark on in terms of the citywide vision for out of school time really hopefully will capture this bigger picture around health and fitness. Because I would agree with Mr. Green, which is, you know, I don't think our goals with this program, I saw you both nodding your heads, are not about being the winningest teams, right? They're all
Nice.
about how can we.
Laura, is your mic on?
My apologies. I said so many important things. Just kidding. Just a reference to this.
All brilliant, all of it.
Oh, brilliant. The citywide out of school time, and hoping that health and fitness is just one big element of this. It's not just about having childcare for our kids, but we're developing these hopefully lifelong perspective on how to take care of our bodies and have fitness be a high value. And I was complimenting the middle school volleyball program and how that has really created more of a pipeline. And I couldn't believe when I saw 68 kids, females, on the volleyball team. That's phenomenal. That's just a huge change in a handful of years. And so I'm curious, I guess, you know, getting the input from the students or what the barriers are for students. We know some of it's working schedules. Some students are intimidated about being on a team. And whenever we're able to offer things like JV or even freshman teams, if the barrier is putting coaches in, let's put the coaches in, and I think that's what you've been trying to do. But, you know, allowing us to also explore non-competitive physical activity, whether it's just exercise programs, dance, yoga. I'm sure there's a lot of other ones out there, but I would love to, whether or not they need to be clubs or not. So anyway, I just echoing a lot of what everyone's saying. Hopefully this will be part of the out of school time vision. And I did have a question specifically about why don't we fund clubs? Why are they second tier to varsity sports?
So I actually, in everything you're saying, I mean, Stan and I, we're big believers in the power of sports or even physical activity and what it can do for young people's confidence, the sense of team. I mean, he and I can both go on for a long time. Yeah, we'll talk all night. But one thing I do want to point out is that while the high school will do whatever it can, and you know, Stan also works with has really expanded the middle school program, we can't do it alone, particularly around funding. Most schools, we are very rare, most schools charge $200, $300, $400 per kid per season, and so a lot of their athletic funding is coming from that. We're not going to do that. You know, that's a ridiculous barrier, and if we're not going to do that, we also can't have, you know, a huge portion of the school's budget going towards athletics. So we were talking earlier about these partnerships that that you mentioned, partnerships with rec, even encouraging or partnering with parents in the community, even more, I always say it wrong, 501c3, 3C, more. It's like my high school, I just had a general athletic booster program. There's Somerville Youth Soccer, there's an ultimate organization, there's a hockey organization, like all of just really trying to do partnerships, because this cannot be, to your point, if we're looking at all of the services we need for students in both the younger grades and the older, we cannot put this on the schools, and we particularly cannot put it on the schools when we're already rightly carrying the financial burden, because we know that we can't put that onto our students. And so yes to all of it, and please partner. We need to be really thinking about partnerships with community and with the city.
Just one more thing regarding the club. I want to make sure I heard you properly. So when a team or a sport has a club status, all it's saying to us is that the MIAA, our governing body, doesn't recognize it as a sport. That's really all it is. From our perspective, it's treated the exact same way. It really is. As far as funding, transportation, everything we're doing, there's some fundraising that is done by club teams, but similarly, our varsity teams are also fundraising. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that we are treating them exactly the same.
I apologize, I might have misheard
Oh, it's
something.
okay.
I got the impression
No,
that
I'm
they
happy
had
you
to
asked.
fundraise for certain
Yeah,
things
no, happy you asked.
than other varsity.
Oh, thank you.
We have to look at that one a little bit. I only know Ultimate, so I can't speak universally, but I know we buy our own uniforms and have to do our tournament fees. But they do I gotta tell you, I was around when we started Ultimate, 17 years ago, and we just started from scratch. And the district we get way more than most club programs. So I still say we with Ultimate. The Ultimate program still gets way more than most schools. They get, the coaches paid for, the field access, the transportation, all of the things, but there's, at least for Club Ultimate, a little more financial stuff, and that's just, again, just comes down to budget. What the athletics gets budget for is the varsity sports and a little bit less for the club sports, but it's just a matter of limited resources for more teams. But I can't speak to the other club sports.
I have Dr. Phillips.
Thanks, through you, Chair. I think this is to the district. I'd just like to request that a copy of this fabulous presentation gets sent to the mayor. I know this is a personal interest of hers. This is a place where our high school is shining. Let's spread that word.
It was already shared, but I can reshare it. Yeah.
Ms. Barish?
Thank you. Through you, I just wanted to speak a bit to the partnerships, and Dr. Ackman mentioned the high school soccer clinic that happens in the summer. The recreation department does run a lot of summer programming, including golf, actually. But I think one of the challenges is the program design. A lot of these summer camp opportunities are an hour or 2 hours, like maybe 10 to noon, which automatically limits who's going to participate. Families that need all-day care or enrichment or activities for their students can't depend on a 2-hour program that's run by the rec that is only going to happen if the sun is out and it's not 97 degrees. And right, so, and is at Dilboy, right, you have to be able to get across town. So I think in collaborating, and not to disparage the way the rec is running their programming, because they have limitations as well, funding and space and all the things, and staff. But just to shine a light on the importance of program design if you're really trying to increase participation and access.
I had Mr. Bitone and then Mr. Green.
Thank you, Chair, through you. I don't need a response to this now, but this may be a topic around engaging our middle grades and younger grades in athletics citywide in partnership with the schools through the Children's Cabinet. I don't know if this topic has been addressed there, but this could be an area, because there's so many different players in this area, so just an idea.
Mr. Green?
First, to Mr. Batone's point, not to my knowledge, I've missed a meeting, but I don't believe that was on the agenda for that meeting, so I don't think this particular issue has come up in Children's Cabinet. I agree it could and should. I wanted to build on a couple of things that were said, because it comes back to we need to decide what we want to do, because that'll determine how we want to fund it. like, rec can make that decision. The rec department's decision is they want to provide as many services to as many people as possible. So they have intentionally gone for a breadth over depth model. If our goal, and I think implicitly it is to provide access to find some activity for people to connect to, whatever it is, for as many people as possible, then I don't know if we're funding athletics properly. If it's funding more clubs, I don't know what it is, but I think we want to be giving you the resources you need to fulfill that mission, recognizing that determining what the mission is more definitively will give us guidance to do that. So I really want to reemphasize that we have to figure out what we want to be spending our money on. And yes, to the partnership piece, it takes a full city. But even there, if you want to rally partnerships, well, we have to have a goal. And I don't know that we've ever, as a district, articulated one well. And that's on us, not on you. I want to be really clear on that.
I think just building off Mr. Green's point about what our purpose is for our athletics department, and I'm just curious, I don't know that there's a way to get this statistic, but I don't know if you know anecdotally even if there are students who the only thing that gets them to school is because if they don't come to school, they can't play football or whatever it is. And so I would love to be able to sort of quantify that if there's a way to do it.
I can tell you, I don't have specific stats on this, but I can tell you, in speaking with our students and speaking with our coaches, when you look at things like attendance and grades, we've tracked our kids. We've seen the improvement in those areas because of their desire and their love for their sport. It's very real, very prevalent. And just to piggyback on what was just said, I think one of the things about the city of Somerville, which makes it very special, but also challenging, is our facilities, right? It's one of the challenges we really have. But the thing that really hits home with me is when I look out my window, and you can see it from here, is that we are a city of collaborators. Everything we do, we have to partner, everything. And I think once you understand and really appreciate what that means, I can't tell you how great it feels to walk out on our fields, our wonderful high school field, at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and see Somerville Youth Soccer out there. It's phenomenal. It's unbelievable, right, that we have these resources, but and I always joke and say that we have a city, when it comes to athletic facilities, that as soon as somebody is done with their 2-hour slot, there's people like this waiting to get on, right? And it's amazing to watch, and it takes people who understand what that means to never get upset at each other for wanting to get on a few minutes early. So like I said, it's a special city, and you have to understand what it means, but when you understand and you see it, you really appreciate what it means and what it represents for the city of Somerville. It's a magnificent place, it really is. I'm happy and excited to see what's been given to us and what's been added over the last several years, and I think we're in a really good place from a facility standpoint.
I appreciate it immensely, and I just want to say, I'm looking at this in part through the eyes of someone who works in philanthropy, and I know that I would love for people to go to get things you can see out this window to Puma and say, hey, this is your North American headquarters. I want $1 million to do X, Y, and Z for our children and their youth athletics. So part of what I'm saying here is, what's X, Y, Z that I can go to Puma and say, give me 6, 7 figures for?
I just wanted to say the reference on one of the last slides about coaches using athlete feedback surveys. I'm really interested in that, and I hope that as it sounds like that's use of those surveys is increasing, and as that continues, I hope that you can share some of that data with us, just to help us understand, what the student athlete experience is like. I did look at the student athlete handbook, and there was a reference to Captain's Council. Is that a new initiative? And yeah, because I'm just curious. I'm really interested in sort of how we're developing sort of leadership among our students, and how our student feedback is influencing the decisions that we make about, the investments in the program.
It's a great question. So we actually had, it started back right around COVID. And what we did during COVID was we had Zoom meetings with our Captain's Council, which was very successful. As you can imagine, once we were back in school, attendance really was tough for us to get students to get back in a classroom together. The way we've built it is it's 2 representatives per team as part of the Captain's Council. So it's a whole group of students. Last year we had a few meetings. We picked up some steam, and this year we have a full slate. We meet once a month. It's always on a Wednesday after, because of early dismissal. And we get together and we go over a variety of topics, whether it's community service, leadership, accountability, how do you make your team better? We've talked about incorporating a spirit cup, to celebrate other teams going to other games, and how do we build spirit? So there's a variety of topics we go over. We have a guest speaker come in every year to talk to our students. We do a networking opportunity, so there's a lot of things that we do. I think one of the biggest things for us is for our students to really understand what it means to give back to the city. So for the last couple of years, a lot of our teams have been working with the Mission Church over in Somerville and the food bank, and giving back and doing Saturday morning runs and stocking shelves. So there's a lot of things that we try to do to help build our student athletes. There's also several conferences and things through the MIAA we bring our students to. The Greater Boston League has a student summit that's actually next Friday, where we bring 20 of our students, and they collaborate and connect and team build with other students from other schools. So there's a whole slew of things that we do to help our kids grow as leaders and impress on them, what it means to be part of a team, how to be accountable, how to be a leader, and kind of the next chapter of your life, after high school, So there's a lot of things in between there that we try to do to make sure that we're helping our students grow.
Great. Thank you so much. Seeing no further questions or comments, we will let you go. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Dr. Carmona?
Well, we are on the last part of my report. So to close out today's district report, there is a memo from Food and Nutrition Services Department Director Lauren Mancini in your packets. So the memo provides detailed reminders of department practices and protocols, information about where and how food is prepared and distributed district-wide, and the kinds of scratch-made options available for all the students. Our Food and Nutrition Services Department team is skilled, hardworking, and provide a really great and varied menu for our district. I want to thank Lauren Mancini and her team for all that they do. That memo is in your packet. I don't know if you have any questions about that, but I know that at some point there were questions about some of the options that we offer. That came from our last meeting, so I decided to share that with you. And again, in the name of Wraparound Services, because our food department does a significant amount of work, and I don't think is highlighted as it should. But I am also quite aware of the time, so I'm just going to share that with you, that's the last part of my report.
And just so everyone is aware, there was a Hispanic Heritage Month presentation, but Ms. Gaetano couldn't be here this evening, so we will table that to our next meeting.
Absolutely, and the time is, we have spent, sorry that I brought many topics to the table, but yes, that will not be, unless you're not planning on discussing that right now, is that right? No. Yes, so we will be tabling that for the next one.
So that concludes your report?
That concludes my report.
All right, that brings us to some reports of subcommittees. I will entertain a motion.
I move to accept the report of the Rules Management Subcommittee. Can I do them together? And the report of the Joint Buildings Subcommittee.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Dr. Phillips. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the MASC Conference Delegate and Resolution. So just for some context, there is the MASC conference coming up in November. In your packet are the resolutions that will come before that body to guide the leadership of the MASC and what their legislative priorities are. Typically what happens is if we choose to, we can nominate someone who will be at the conference to represent us there, and we can choose to give that person specific feedback on a specific motion, or we can say to them, we authorize you to use your judgment in the room about these resolutions. So we don't have to vote on that this evening. We'll have it on our agenda for the next meeting. Remind me who of my colleagues is coming to the conference? And amongst us four, does anyone have a desire to be the delegate?
When is it again? When is the assembly this year?
I will have to look. Oh, he means like it's November 6th to the 9th.
Right, but like, is it, yeah.
I don't remember, I'll have to look. So we can discuss offline amongst ourselves who is interested in being the delegate, and we will bring that to the body for our next meeting. We will also bring the resolutions. So is there any question or discussion about the resolutions that anyone would like to talk about tonight? If not, it will be on our agenda for our next meeting. Okay?
Actually,
yeah.
I would love some data from Somerville about Resolution 2 and the increase of the compulsory attendance age and like what would it actually mean in Somerville.
Sorry, which one is it?
Resolution 2 to increase the compulsory attendance age.
Oh, okay. Dr. Carmona, it's this one. Again, we can discuss it. Well, I'll check in with Dr. Carmona before our next meeting, but that's a good question. Okay. With that, that brings us to the Superintendent 24-25 self-assessment and goals. Dr. Phillips, did you want to frame us on that?
Could we take the evaluation out of order and do that before the goals?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Why don't we just quickly run through, we'll do this one when we get to the evaluation. So that brings us to some diplomas. I will entertain a motion to grant diplomas. Anyone have them ready?
I move to approve diplomas for the following students: Josue Alfaro Herrera of Waltham, Massachusetts, Kathleen Barbosa of Somerville, Massachusetts, and Patricia Quintana de Leon of Somerville, Massachusetts.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Mr. Vitone. Seeing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations to our newest graduates. That brings us to some field trips. Yes, Mr. Vitone.
I will move to approve a field trip from October 9th, 2024 to October 11th, 2024 for 46 sixth grade students from the West Somerville Neighborhood School to visit Nature's Classroom in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Travel will be via bus. Student cost is $160.
Motion by Mr. Vitone, seconded by Ms. Barish. Seeing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to some grants to accept.
I make a motion to accept all federal entitlement and continuation grants and all state continuation grants awarded to the Somerville Public Schools listed below. The Adult Education and Family Literacy for $816,646, a Scale continuation grant from the state, and a federal Strengthening Career and Technical Education grant for $87,945 for the CTE department.
Motion by Ms. Patone, seconded by Dr. Phillips. Seeing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to donations.
I move to accept with gratitude the following donations. A donation of $2,500 from Bob's Discount Furniture in Manchester, Connecticut to the East Somerville Community School, and a donation of personal protective equipment from the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency in Franklin, Massachusetts, valued at $10,473 to the CTE department.
Motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Mr. Vitone. Seeing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the Superintendent 23-24 summative evaluation. Dr. Phillips?
Awesome. Great. So if you open the superintendent evaluation timeline, you will see that we are wrapping up the end of the year one evaluation. We'll either do that tonight if we're going to vote on this, or at our next meeting if we're just going to do a first reading. But just to put in context, what you have before you in the packet tonight is our combined evaluation form. So what I did, I took the individual evaluation form that everyone in this room, plus President Ewan Campen did, and I created a big table of all the ratings that everyone created and all of the qualitative comments that they put. If you recall, we decided that our quantitative ratings would be the mode of all of our participants. So that's the most common, the most frequent choice that each of us made. And then the qualitative comments, I coded them thematically, like a qualitative researcher would do. Any theme where at least 2 of us said a similar comment made it into the combined evaluation form. So if you had a chance to read it before this meeting, you'll see it was overwhelmingly positive feedback. There were a few areas where folks gave some really thoughtful, constructive feedback. But I think what we wanted to do is open it up to any questions from the group, and then you can decide if we're just gonna come back to this next week or vote now.
I have Mr. Green, Mr. Bitone, and then Ms. Barish.
So my first question is is trying to remember what the rules are. I believe that while our comments are confidential and consolidated, like done in this thing, isn't there some requirement that our individual scores be public?
Yep.
It's all public. So your individual rating is all it's public. Anyone can access it. It's on file. Ms. Garcia has it.
Okay, just wanted to double check that.
Ms. Bitone? Yeah.
Apologies. Through you, Chair. I think I referenced to you, historically, we would actually create a little table, and it would have every member's names and their ratings for all of the items. I didn't know if we were obligated to do that, or we just wanted to do that in the interest of transparency. Because we're using the mode, it's a little, as our choice, it's not like people can just average the numbers up and come up with a ranking. So, I liked that method because I think it made us more accountable as members of the committee, but I would leave it to the discretion of the body or the chair.
Dr. Phillips?
We have that. That's also in the big folder that Ms. Garcia has.
Mr. Bitone?
Just a clarifying question to something through you to Dr. Phillips said when introducing this topic. Were there any members of this body that did not submit an evaluation?
There were.
Ms. Barish and then Mr. Green?
In fairness, I don't know that the mayor has ever filled out a superintendent evaluation on time on school committee, so this is not a new trend.
Ms. Barish?
I just wanted to thank our colleague, Dr. Phillips, for making this what is sort of a complicated and challenging process as simple and straightforward and clear as possible. I really appreciated all of the documents with all of the instructions. I'm sorry that maybe we didn't quite do it exactly right, but it is not your fault, and I am just so grateful that you took this on. Thank you.
Yep, Mr. Green?
I obviously encourage the public to read the evaluation in full, but I also recognize that most people won't. So I do think it's important just to, name a few of the highlights. I think the summation is pretty spot on. I have no problem with voting on it tonight. I think the feeling of this committee is that Dr. Carmona has had a successful first year as superintendent. Like any first year superintendent, there are places where growth can be done. It's not a job that anyone masters year one. And I wanted to highlight for myself that I think a real place that I'm already seeing growth I'm excited by, but I want to highlight as something I think we're going to care about a lot in this next coming year because of what's going on this year, is just making sure that you give yourself time to do relationship building. As is discussed sometimes in this meeting and other meetings before, Somerville is a city that runs on relationships. And so, like, giving yourself that space and that time, even as the amount of work that needs to be done is daunting at times, I think is going to be key to what we hope to be your long-term time and tenure in this district.
Thank you for that. Yep, Mr. Bouton.
I guess I also just want to step back to the big picture for a moment on this evaluation, and I can't speak for my colleagues, but I'll just say, through you, Chair, to the superintendent, that we're all invested. Again, I'm speaking for myself, but I think we're all invested in your success, and we share the same commitment. So I think this document reflects, at least for me, my goal to support you in continuing to be a leader for this district. So I'm really, I was really heartened to see all of the fantastic feedback, and looking forward to seeing where we go together. That's it.
Okay. So my instinct, as is our general practice, would just be to have this on our agenda for our next meeting and vote on it then, unless someone objects to that plan. Okay. So this will be on our agenda, and we will vote on it at our next meeting, and then that brings us to the next part. Dr. Phillips?
Thanks, through you, Chair. So in our quest to get fully aligned with the timeline for principal and teacher evaluations, we're going to also kick off this year's evaluation process tonight. So if you go back to that timeline, Member Patone and me and Dr. Carmona met a few times between August and now to talk about the goals and the focus indicators for this 24-25 school year. We're here tonight to discuss that draft together as a group, and make sure that everyone has their questions answered, their comments made, so that next meeting we can vote to approve the goals and focus indicators and kick off this process again. That would make our formative evaluation discussion happen in early February, with kind of the final evaluation happening at the end of the school year. So we're hustling now to get onto that kind of regular cadence that principals are on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent to walk us through the draft of his goals and focus indicators for the current year. That's also in your packet.
Through the chair, thank you, Dr. Phillips. Before I get going, I just wanted to respond to the kind comments. I think my work is all about learning and feedback, and so I take that seriously, and I think that has to be modeled, and so I really appreciate the feedback that I've gotten. I know that before I opened that document, I was dreading the idea of like how much do I have to really totally redo my life and start a new me. But luckily, most of the feedback was along the lines of very positive, and the piece around building relationships is something that I appreciate. It not only hasn't come from this body, but some other friends in the district. So I think it's valuable, especially for the work that I do. So I do appreciate that, and I feel that the work that we do is important. We had a meeting today with our administrative team, and one of the things that I said is that we're very fortunate. We're very fortunate that we're in this business. We're fortunate that folks are out there looking at what makes their life meaningful. We have in front of us a charge that is very unique, and that hopefully folks have a full understanding that what we do is God's work, or Muhammad's work, or whatever deity you follow. That is the work that we do, and I think that we need to take it to that level. So thank you for that. So I am asked to share with you there are two goals that have set up based of part of the process. We all, teachers, actually, educators, have to go through the same thing. You have to have a professional practice goal and a student learning goal. And for us also, we have to have some district improvement goals. So in conversation with some members of the team, we selected 4 goals that actually top of the work that is like part of the focus of the work that I do, but in formalizing them and also aligning them to a strategic plan will help me guide the work that we do and focus on that work. So the first one is a student learning goal. Again, every educator in our district has to do the same. So mine, as you see it, it's not just a 1-year goal. It's actually, in reality, it should be a 3-year goal. But what I am doing with that goal is I'm using the structures in place. Actually, this goal doesn't come in isolation. It's in collaboration with Dr. Jessica Boston Davis and the teams that are in place. The idea is making sure that we, especially with the emphasis for our students who need our support the most, students who require specialized instruction as well as multilingual learners. With those students in mind, in our K-12 system, we want to create a system that allows them access and engages them through high-quality, evidence-based, and cultural responsive curriculum. And so the idea is to use a system that we have in place already, the SPS curriculum review cycle, to constantly assess the work that we do and assess the quality of the programs that we have. And so that's in most areas of literacy, science, social studies, and math, as well as some other areas like world languages and the English curriculum at the high school. So the idea, again, is to use a system that is in place, a system that has been improved. There are some infrastructure around that. There are educators district-wide that actually get together to review this curriculum and provide feedback, not only feedback on the improvement that has to happen, but also on the cycle of every one of these different programs that we have. There are some action steps under each one of them. So I'm not going to read them all, but I want you to just kind of get familiar with those action steps. And then the piece that is actually is really important and sometimes is actually hard to land your measurement is the benchmark of progress. Those are often have to be very clear because they will allow us to understand how we're making progress in whatever we decide to do. So in this case, there are 3 benchmarks. One is setting up a target of growth that we haven't established yet. I think that, we are building some different systems, or we are working around the creation of some expectations on some data systems like the iReady or the DIBELS. And so what I put there was basically we need to make sure that every student grows at least a year growth. For some of our students who need more support, that kind of trajectory will not get them out of their level of performance where they are. So I suggested a 1-year growth and 1.5 growth based on that metric. The other piece is around collecting feedback on the process and also making improvements based on the work that happens with the walkthroughs. So looking at the instruction with a lens of teachers working in the classroom and evaluators and educators, actually, not only principals but also educators that visit classrooms and see the instruction and make corrections or recommendations for improvement. And the last benchmark on that one is establishing a baseline data through the Conditions for Learning survey to gauge student engagement and to create engagement targets. This is actually a recommendation that came in conversation with some of your colleagues. I think is interesting to establish that correlation. I do think it's possible, but I think that this is one that we're going to have to work collectively. So using the Conditions for Learning to determine how students are engaged in learning. So that correlation might not be a straight cut, but I think is one creative way to say, are kids really enjoying the current curriculum? Are they engaged? Is it resulting in creating the learning that we want for kids? So Those are the benchmarks. The focus indicators are, they're usually related to the rubric of the Department of Ed. So this is about instruction, and all of these goals actually touch upon indicators A through D. Any questions? Do you want me to finish through? This is just the student learning goals, so we have a set of other goals. So how do you want to do this, goal by goal, or?
Mr. Green?
Is there anything in here that's not self-explanatory? Because one of the things I was going to continue on is this feels very clear to me, and I follow this. So, is there anything you think needs more explanation, or can we trust our members to read it and think on it before we meet it next week, or 2 weeks from now? Sorry.
Dr. Carmona, is there anything?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought the question was for everyone.
Well, is there anything that you particularly want to highlight? Otherwise, I think given the late hour, we can digest it and read it and bring questions to our next meeting. Was Mr. Green's?
I actually find this exercise a little bit difficult right now because I think you're right. I think this is actually a draft that was conceived based on the efforts of every members of different departments that I work with, the feedback that I got from the school committee, and then a second revision of that. And I do think that for me, I would have to sit down and say, what does this mean for me?
I think,
And so I totally agree with you that this might be a matter of you to review and then give me feedback after the process of deep reading. So I totally agree with that. So, but I'm open to the recommendation.
I think that's fine. Ms. Patone?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. To the superintendent, I think it could be useful. I mean, going through all the detail is valuable, and I agree that maybe it's not the right thing to do right now, but maybe just highlighting why these were the 5 goals at the highest level would be super helpful, I think, for people watching this as well as for us.
Absolutely.
There's probably 50 things you could have chosen from, and so why you chose these 5 right now would be helpful as we evaluate over the next 2 weeks.
Good point, and I can do that. For me, instruction is what it is it right? And so creating a curriculum, or not creating, but adopting curriculum that reflects the students' experiences, a curriculum that is also validated through more rigorous assessments of the quality of the curriculum is also critical. And not only that, but I think this, the system actually, and Dr. Jessica David Boston has been at the heart of creating this iterative system to review the curriculum. I think is brilliant, and I think it allows us to go and check, did this work, didn't work, do we have to replace it? And not everything happens at the same year or at the same time. I think is a great system for us to elevate and to continue the work. And again, it's all about the instruction and the curriculum that we choose. The second one around professional practice goal, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and the work that I'm doing with NISIP, leading now, and also the Transcend group is all about creating student-centered systems. I am passionate about that. The idea of creating a portrait of a Somerville learner is something that I think is not going to happen right now. That's probably going to take a 3-year cycle. And I think it's essential for all of us to, when we say, what do we want our babies to become when they come out of high school, we all should have a very similar idea of what that is. And there are 4 other improvement goals. One is about the out of school time. That has been one that has been controversial, as you know, is one that is also very complex. It just requires a cross-sector work and a lot of braided systems. And so I would like to utilize the similar system that we have with early childhood that has been created in collaboration with the city. So there's a lot that we can do together with the city. I feel that it's also really important for our families, and this is one thing that I hear from all families across the board. They really want to solve this issue. So paying close attention to that, I think, will allow me to make a dent in terms of the challenges that we face here. Goal number 2 is also, this is something that is also, I got feedback from many different stakeholders around communication. and more importantly, how does our website kind of makes it easy for our community to access information. And one point of that also that was in the revision and discussion with the school committee members was how do we increase the engagement with families through the relationship with teacher families. So that's a great goal. I think is one also that is related to our strategic plan and is something that I'm passionate about. Both as a parent or as an educator, I always felt that relationship is critical. Goal number 3, improvement goal number 3 is about, that one is about OST. So so what was number 2? Hold on. Oh, the facilities one, correct. So the facilities one, obviously, you know how important it is for us to develop a system that is nimble, that it allows us also to be systematic about how we are addressing the needs of the district and also prevent in the short and long-term future. And the last one is about, which is actually part of a goal that was stated in your goals from past years, which was about increasing the racial and cultural diversity of our staff. And so I am kind of taking that from what we had before and adjusted it based on our current needs and current realities. But I think that that's an important goal, just to make sure that the demographic of our staff reflects some affinity with the demographic of our students. So,
thank you for that high-level explanation. Unless there are specific questions or comments, we will have both of these on our agenda at our next meeting to discuss and vote on. Ms. Patel.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I had a question about the timeline. So there's a great deal of work that goes for the evaluation. There's a great deal of work that happens over the summer. But yet we're putting together our goals in October, and we're going to evaluate the superintendent in June. So I'm kind of curious why we're taking out, 4 months of work that the superintendent and the administration does, and that's not part of the evaluation, unless I'm missing something.
I think going forward, it would be more like June to June, if I'm understanding. I'll let Dr. Phillips speak to it.
That's what I don't get.
Yeah.
I don't really remember either when we worked it out. Do you, Superintendent?
So this is the time of the year when teachers and evaluators and principals set up their goals. And so they set the goals up right now. This is the time of the year. And then they have a full year or 2 years to implement the goals. So I think the timing, in my mind, it makes sense to basically set out to say, I have a full year or 2 years to actually complete this cycle. So that kind of makes sense. I don't know if I read the whole question that you had. So what part of the discrepancy do you?
So my confusion is the evaluation cycle, if we start it now, I'm sorry, is it okay?
No, go ahead.
Sorry, through you, Chair. If we start the evaluation cycle now and then we evaluate you in the beginning of June, there's like all of June, all of July, all of August, where a great deal of work happens in the district, particularly in the central office. And so we're not actually including that aspect of work in the evaluation. We're just doing it over the school year. So it's something, we can talk about it offline. It kind of flagged something to me and made me kind of curious about why we would only do the I understand it's the school year. It's not that I'm not naive about that, but summer is a great deal of work and I would want to include that, but maybe I'm off base.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's a good point, and in reality, we won't be able to have most of this data by June. Some of this data actually is also collected in that period of time. So, I have to look at what the timelines, but it could be that it can be extended to August. I don't know. I think it's an issue, the technical issue of us getting together and doing the reporting as well.
Dr. Phillips and then Mr. Green.
Sounds like we should just circle back. I think maybe the problem comes from me and forgetting that it was supposed to go like on the same timeline as this year with the summative happening, starting the first meeting in August to the October date. But why don't we take it offline and come back to you all next week?
Mr. Green? Okay. All right, with that, that brings us to an MSBA update. Do we have anything to update?
So really, we don't have an update right now. I think the timelines that we have are already, we don't have any deliverables right now. The only thing I wanted to share with you is that the construction advisory group will have its first meeting tomorrow, and that will be at the high school from 5:30 to 8:30 at the high school. And moving forward, I believe that it's going to be a mix of both in-person as well as virtual meetings.
And those are open to the public?
They will be open to the public, yeah. And will be also recorded.
Great. Thank you for that update. I look forward to hearing about how that meeting went. All right, that brings us to items from committee members. Does anyone have anything they would like to share? Ms. Rito?
Thank you, Chair, through you. I have 3 short items. I'll just do one, or I can do a, great, thank you very much. First item, just wanted to let the rest of the body and the public know that we did not get through all of our agenda items at the joint facilities and maintenance subcommittee meeting with City Council, and we have scheduled a follow-up meeting on October 28th at 6 p.m. So I welcome people to tune in for that. Second is Ward 7 joint office hours will be held on Saturday, October 19th from 2 to 3:30 at the new Basma Cafe, which I have not been to, so I'm really looking forward to that. It's where Renee's used to be, for those who know, on Holland Street, 198 Holland Street. That's with Ward 7 City Councilor Pineda Neufeld, Rep. Barber, and Senator Jalen. So please join us if anyone would like to come out and share whatever thoughts they would like. And the last item is more of a request through you, Chair, to the superintendent or your staff for an update on the situation at the high school with the Bunsen burners, but also I'm hearing rumblings that the middle school Bunsen burners that I thought had been, the situation there had been addressed back in the spring, that some of those facilities, or some of those equipments are not operational as well. So I just would appreciate an update for district-wide, if possible. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Parrish?
Thank you. It just occurred to me, we had an update from our athletics director, Mr. Vieira, and winter sports registration opened on October 1st for anyone interested in winter sports and closes on December 9th. So if your student is interested in participating in athletics this winter, now's the time.
Thank you for that reminder. Ms. Patel?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just wanted to announce, I know we all got an email about the Somerville CPAC, so the Somerville Special Education Parent Advisory Council, they're hosting a social. So there's no particular agenda, there's going to be no presentation, but for any parents or guardians who really want to talk to other families, or I imagine there's going to be some staff there as well, about their experience, have questions, and build a network and some relationships. I really encourage people to participate. It's at 6:30 to 8:30 at the neighborhood restaurant on 25 Bow Street. And thank you to the CPAC for hosting this.
Thank you for that reminder. When? Tomorrow night. Okay, if that is it for items from board members, Dr. Phillips, do we have condolences? We did our meeting in honor of our one condolence this evening. So with that, we are adjourned. Have a good night, everyone. Try to